Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about the economics of distributism because this is going to be uh, a sticking point for a fair number of people. And this is precisely because distributism being both capitalist and communist, the communists are going to respond very well and say, hey, I'm hearing all of this people oriented stuff where you don't want to be dependent on other people because it's an inconvenience for them. And at the same time, you're just because, you're not relying on them doesn't mean you can't help them. And so you're removing a negative from them and giving them a positive. That sounds great. But a lot of the capitalists are going to hear that this sounds a lot like people somehow doing some centralized market type thing where it's not really a free market if everyone is like forced into not having any sellers or buyers or anything. And so like how do you get the stuff? And yeah, it's a fair concern, and it's not something you can have happen overnight. And this is why it's a goal to move towards. And one of the best things about it is it doesn't have to happen right away. It can be slow and steady. But at the same time, individuals can get there right now with the technology today. You know how I know this? Because in the past, before all this technology, they were able to feed themselves through their own work on their own land. So it's obviously possible, and it's only more possible today with all of the technology we have. I mean, hey, you got a closet and you can put some aquaponics in there. That's some food. Good nutrition. That's awesome. And that's very simple in terms of space, and that's one of the great things about technology. And so I definitely recommend, on a side note, just anyone out there, try aquaponics. It's way easier than growing stuff outside, in fact, because you don't have to worry about, the bugs and the pH balance of the dirt and all this stuff. You put in the right stuff in the water, and the right stuff comes out. That's pretty much it. It's very simple. You get the measurements right, boom, done. It's all nice and scientific, lab setting. It's good. But we're not talking about just some aquaponics here. We're talking about the whole market system we have, where every single person is both a producer and a consumer. And you are probably very highly specialized. And so, when you're specialized, that means you produce one, maybe two things. And that's it. And then, you have to buy everything else. And what's more is you may not even use the thing you make. Me, for instance, I'm a software engineer, but I write software for healthcare companies. I'm not going to use that ever. Like, when is that going to be relevant in my life? It's not useful to me. So, yeah. I'm not going to use it. And so I'm producing something that I'll never use. But someone else finds benefit in it, and so I'm getting paid. And that payment allows me to get all those things that I do want. But notice, the individual goal of every person is to be financially independent. At least that's the goal they should have, whether or not they think it's reasonable or not. That's what it is. is to go out there, make enough money to, not starve, have a house, all this stuff, and then stop, right? To not have to work anymore. That's the goal, that's the dream. But if that's the dream, to no longer have to work, how do you achieve that? And you achieve that by, one, creating a system in which production happens whether you're there or not. Or two, using other people. And so the capitalist sees both as valid. The second one sounds pretty bad to a communist. And after all, as a distributist, I'm both. So I can't just use people up. That's off the table for me. I don't want to do that. Maybe I can teach them and show them and mentor them and somehow justify it that way. But even then, I would want to have an end date on that. I can't just be teaching and mentoring them until the day they die. That's not mentorship. I would say probably 10 years tops. That's the absolute most you should be able to use someone's time, to use someone's skills and abilities, even if you're the one teaching them to the abilities to them. 10 years tops, absolute max. Like this idea that you can just use someone from when they're 20 to when they're 65, that's just an abhorrent system. And so, two methods. One's out, where we can't feed ourselves off of someone else's back. That's not cool. That's not good. So what's left is creating a system that is productive on its own. And so, this is where the capitalist says this is so unfeasible. Where we're supposed to replace all of the things we get not with people, not with different peoples with different skills and all this stuff, but rather with a system of you and maybe some machines and junk. And then that's it. Now, I'm not advocating that, just wait around for generalized artificial intelligence and then, boom, problem solved, robots everywhere, make everything and we're all good. I mean, yeah, sure, fine, that's awesome, but that's not the point. Because you see, creating a system is so much more than being productive. It's about being responsible with what you already have. And so, let's use an example. There are farmers who plow their fields every year, work very hard, reap the harvest, bring it back in, and that's a lot of work. That's the type of farming most people are familiar with. But then there's other types of farms, other types of crops that are perennial. They come year in, year out. And as long as nothing goes wrong, no pests, no deficiency in the soil, no drought, assuming everything goes right, then you get food every single year probably for the rest of your life. Fruit tree is a great example. Fruit trees last 40, 50 years once they're established. Depends on the fruit tree, depends on what's going on in the habitat and all that stuff. But, a long time. Almost your whole life. Some longer than your whole life. And so, set up the tree, get it all set up, all producing, and then let it grow. And then next year, you collect your fruit. The year after, you collect your fruit. The year after that, you collect your fruit. And there's some maintenance, for sure. But that's a system that is productive without you. You go away for a year. You don't even touch the fruit. You don't even do anything with it. And you come back the next year. And there's going to be fruit growing on those trees that year too. The fruit will keep growing whether you're there or not. The tree doesn't need you to be productive. And that's the kind of investments that you need to be doing. Trees are an obvious example. But you see, there's more than that. For example, a well. A lot of people pay for water year in, year out. They don't have any water that they call their own. The only water they have is the stuff they buy from the tap. And they don't think of it that way, but there's a water bill every month. So that's the reality. For a well, you drill the well, you set up a pump, and then you have water. And I have to tell you, living where I do now, it is so nice to not have a water bill. I don't even think about it. I just water all the plants. I leave on the sprinkler and my kids run in it and then they run inside. And like 2 hours later, I'm like, guess it was running. And it's fine. Doesn't cost me any money. I mean, if you want to get technical, the pump runs on electricity, blah, 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 blah. It cost me like a penny for like running it for 3 hours or something like that. Sure. But practically free. I don't even have to think about it twice. And that's relaxing. That's relieving. That's independence. And so, there's more. Solar panel. Then you have electricity. There's so many things you can do to make your life easier. And when you make your life easier and you do incremental improvements where you have to rely on people just a little bit less, just a little bit less, just a little bit less, that's always a good thing. Where you start to say, I have a little bit more time on my hands. Maybe I'll learn how to fix my own car. Right? Do maintenance myself. Hey, the sink's blacked up. Well, maybe I'll give it a shot. Right? I'm not saying you have to replace everything in the world. But what I am saying is it's very possible to be way more independent than you are now. That is absolutely possible. For one, land isn't even that expensive. Across the country, I think the average for land is somewhere around $5,000 an acre to $8,000 an acre, somewhere around there, on average across the whole country. There are places where it's like 2K an acre, and it's like, oh my gosh. And you're not even buying like bulk, like 100 acres at a time. That's like still reasonably small, like only 10 acres. Well, that's 20K for 10 acres. That's like crazy good. Obviously, it needs a lot of work, so maybe not the best example, but I mean, is the barrier between you and independence 10K? Like, is that it? And there's a lot of things that go into that, and there's some things that are really hard to be independent on, like the internet, for example, because inter is part of the word, meaning between people. So that's going to take some work, but there's some creative people working with redefining the concept of an ISP and having a much more independent, much more modular focus to it. That's definitely happening. That those technologies are definitely being produced, and a lot of that stuff is being caught up in legal limbo, and people just don't want. The government just doesn't want people to be independent. So hey, it's a barrier. And so, in terms of the economics of this, when you produce something and you sell it, then there's inflation. If everyone spends money, then there's more money exchanging hands. And it's the money exchanging hands that gets counted as GDP, right? The faster it exchanges hands, the more inflation there is. That's basically how it goes. Because it doesn't matter if I were to print $10 trillion of legal currency if all I did with it was buried it into the ground. You see, it's not changing hands, and so no one in the world cares. Even if it was totally legal, no one would care. It wouldn't change a thing. I spend it once, big deal. Massive inflation, everyone's freaking out. Because it doesn't stop there. Then the next person spends it, and the next person spends it, and the next person spends it. Inflation is how people lose their savings, right? And so, if instead of spending money, adding to that inflation, just use it once, get the thing, that means you never have to spend it again. Buy a solar panel, stick it on your roof, and then you're not reliant on energy. Assuming, hey, power banks and all this stuff, but maybe you get a generator or something. Same thing with a well. Same thing with a garden. There's so many things you can do. Biodiesel, that's another one. And so, yes, all of these things they add up. That maybe instead of going out there and trying to, have someone else do something for you, maybe you give it a shot. Do it yourself first. Fix that plumbing. Fix that car. Give it a shot. Give it a try. Because as knowledge proliferates through YouTube and other sources on the internet, it's easier than ever to do it yourself. And if you do it yourself, then Money isn't exchanging hands. And so that inflation goes down. Everyone gets richer because you didn't spend your money. Now, the issue with that is banks and how they work. Not talking about that right now. That's for another time. But the principle is very simple. The more you take care of yourself, the more you take care of everyone else because they don't have to take care of you. That every time you spend $1, everyone's currency becomes less valuable. Every time you make someone else do something, everyone is worse off. The more independent you can be, the better. Not just for you, but for everyone else. And this is particularly true because the most common thing for people to do once they have a taste of independence is they want to share it. That's what I'm doing. I only have a little bit of a taste. I've moved out to the country and now I actually have land. I feel so much more calm and peaceful. It feels good. And yeah, I want to share that. And when you share it, then other people get that too. They get to be independent too. Because then they want to try it. And that's how this whole movement spreads. Is you go from one person to the next and you say, hey, this is working out great for me. I have proof. Look at what I've done personally. Let me show you how to do it yourself. And that's how this thing grows. The technology will come and improve, make this easier as time goes on. But we don't need some massive, game-changing technology to make this happen. We have everything we need right now. And like I said, the proof is it's been done before with much less technology by our ancestors. We can be independent. We don't have to rely on people that we don't know and inconvenience them and risk all of this toxic behavior where you need them or they need you and then some person gets used and there's this whole power struggle. No. Just be an independent person and everything else will fall into place.